Yo, guys, it's Kyle coming at you from Bane's Film Reviews. Today, I am sitting down with Colby Day, the writer, director, and producer of Lead Follow. I am incredibly excited to sit down with him today. This is, I'm not afraid to say, one of the best things that I've seen this year. And again, I am incredibly excited to have Colby sit down with me today. So, how are we doing today?
I mean, better now. I'm doing good. Thank you, Kyle. It's very nice to hear.
Good, of course, of course. And where are you calling in from?
I'm coming in from sunny LA. I was a New York guy for a long time,
Okay,
but moved out here maybe like 6 or 7 years ago now. Yeah.
nice. Significantly different than New York.
You have space, you get to carry your groceries around in a car instead of on the train. It's
Yeah.
all the stuff everybody says.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not far from New York. I'm in Jersey, Central
Mm-hmm.
Jersey, kind of near the Philly area.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm curious, how did you get into filmmaking in the first place?
Oh my God. Good question. I think as a kid growing up, my family did not like we weren't religious, we didn't go to church, but we went to the movies.
Okay.
Like that is the thing we did. And really, even from like an infant saw everything. It's just like what
Okay.
my parents like to do. We would go to the movies on vacation when we got bored of the vacation.
Yeah.
Like I just grew up there and loved the movies and loved going and being dropped into a new world. And then as I got older, was really interested in like they used to have all those shows of like how did they do the special effects in Terminator? And I
Yeah.
was like obsessed with that stuff as a kid. It was so cool to me. And that's around the time that I realized like, oh wait, people make like there's someone making these things. And so I really from an early age, I was like making dumb commercials with my friends and remaking Indiana Jones with 9 year olds, like all that stuff.
So cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. And then how did Lead Follow come to be? Where
Come
did
to
that
be.
idea come from?
Yeah, I had originally back when I lived in New York, I worked with this theater company called Pipeline Theater Company, and they do a bunch of like one night short theater pieces, and they kind of just propositioned me with like, hey, do you have something that's like 10 minutes long? And I was
Hmm.
like, I can. So I wrote a short play originally that was sort of this idea of like, can you tell the story of a relationship from like first meeting to presenting yourself with, hey, I'm doing well, I don't have any baggage, please date me, to the point where you realize like, oh, being together, I've like learned about myself and do have some baggage, and can we
Hmm.
work on that together? So it started there, and then when I was looking out here because I'm primarily just a writer, not a writer director. So
Hmm.
when I first came out here, I was looking for like what's a thing that I could direct that I feel like I know how to do and that I think like really speaks to what my sensibility is.
Okay.
And so this was something that felt really good to try to do, and then also felt really ambitious, and I wanted to make something ambitious. So the film is like a single take 12-minute
Yeah.
movie, which is an insane undertaking, but that's what we did.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask a question about that because I mean
Yeah.
the fact that you're able to do this in one shot, I, a ton of prep goes into filmmaking in general, but
Yes.
you get the chance to cut and do these different things that you don't get to do with your film. What's
Yeah.
it like prepping for a film like this, where you obviously you can obviously try more than once, but what's it like trying to film for 12 minutes straight?
Physically demanding. Like our steady cam operator, it was like the maximum length of a scene that he really felt like I can do that and not be shaky.
Okay.
So just there are physical constraints to making a single take. And then I think we only really were able to do like 9 takes during the day because of the same thing of like, it's just
Yeah.
tiring. You can't, you can't run around and do this all day. Like you
Right.
physically have to stop. But in terms of the prep work for it, it's, so much of, I think, being a good filmmaker is being prepared to be able to improvise.
Mm,
And this was so much more like, well, we need to be even more prepared, and we also probably won't have as much room to improvise.
yeah.
um so it was like really a lot more like doing theater. You needed actors who could hit pretty specific marks and hit them
Hmm.
pretty consistently, and if they miss a line, could solve it themselves because we didn't
Okay.
really want to be able to stop or start something. We wanted to be able to go all the way through. So it was like choreographing, because they dance. So it was
Mhm.
choreographing their dance, but then it's like choreographing everyone else's dance around them. It was like a
Okay.
full day of prep time was just, okay, but now that we have our actors doing this, where does our camera go? Where do our lights go? How do they all move all the
Hmm.
time? Um, so it just felt closer to prepping for a theater piece than a film piece, just based on like, it has to, you have to go all the way through. It has to work.
Yeah, yeah. And so, which aspect do you think was the most challenging? Was it lighting? Was it the camera work?
Mm,
Was it coming up with dialogue that wasn't too challenging,
it
but what worked?
Oh my God. I mean, every movie, they're all hard all the time. I think that unique to this, because it has dance, because it has music baked in, sound was the thing that we needed like a lot of prep and planning for.
Hmm.
You can't, sound is really finicky on set. It's really hard to like capture good sound, and it's also really important to capture good sound.
Yeah.
So we had actors running, moving, dancing, changing, which is all stuff that like you shouldn't do with sound, like when they're mic'd. That's bad.
Yeah.
um, so I think it was, that's a unique position in that you generally don't, if you have a good sound person, they are able to kind of problem solve everything for you.
Hmm.
And this was one where that was like a very collaborative process across teams to try to be like, okay, well, we need mic packs that are sewn into clothes that are going to be invisible, and we actually can't play the temp track for the dance because then we're not going to be able to hear the dialogue, so we have
Hmm.
to prep the choreography based around, well, we can't have sound. So it all worked and was fine, but it was the job that, and I'm very grateful to our sound recordist who knew this will be really challenging, and
Hmm.
these are the challenges I foresee. So everything with a oneer is hard, but to do it with like good crisp audio was very difficult.
Okay, and then like you said, they're changing outfits, they're changing the setting, things like that. You mentioned it, you compare it to a stage play often, and I
Yeah.
thought of that, and I think I mentioned that in my review. You don't
Mm,
have the luxury of there being a curtain to go hide behind,
mm-mm.
and it's a film compared, opposed to a stage play where people are not expecting to see these things happen. They don't
Right.
want to see these things happen. They can't
Right.
they can't suspend their disbelief and go, well, I know it's a stage play, I'll deal.
Yes.
They want these things to happen the way they expect them to happen, and I think it worked very well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, of course. That was, I think, what one of the things that impressed me the most was that I saw the parallel between the stage play and this, and I thought, I don't know how you could possibly pull this off without literally like throwing a curtain in front of them
Right.
and hiding them. Yeah. So
Right.
so
Well,
so well done on that front.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think it is the challenge of like, and I think that's part of why it sort of immediately lent itself to being a piece that has dance and movement being a part of it, is I think in the same way that like a musical, the rules of a musical are kind of like what you can't say, you have to sing.
Hmm.
This sort of became a piece of like, okay, well, anytime that we're trying to get somewhere new, what is that actually about emotionally, rather than just
Hmm.
like a transition? And so all those transitions then become like musical numbers almost, or it's like, oh, but like what is the inner life of this transition?
Hmm.
Which I think is the thing that makes those satisfying and not sort of like, okay, well, come on guys, like let's get to the next thing here.
Right. And then, so in terms of casting, what was that casting process like? Were you looking for specific types of actors? And then how did you end up settling on
Yeah,
Della and Sam, who were so good?
they're tremendous. Della was originally a friend of a friend, and I knew that I needed someone who was good with just like physical performance and movement
Mm,
and dance, and that was sort of my criteria, is like, if you can, ideally you're someone who's done theater and done dance work. And a friend of mine recommended, like, oh, you should talk to my friend Della. She's
okay.
in like a movement theater company. She's on the show Physical, where she teaches aerobics. I was like, oh, like she can do
Yeah.
this. Great. And then our lead Sam, he was an old friend of mine from back in New York theater days, and he has
Okay.
since kind of become a musician. He's in this band, and so he has for years been like, I'm really eager to try to act again. I want to act
Mm,
again. I thought I was good at it, but I don't really remember now. And so he was in my head as like, I think Sam would be really cool for this. And then we just got tapes from a bunch of people for that role, kind of knowing
okay.
we had Della. And then I also asked Sam, like, would you send me a tape? I know it's weird, we're friends. And you're like rooting for your friends when they are auditioning for something, because like, oh, I hope it's good. I hope they are good
Right.
at it. And he really just blew us all away. And I think our producer was like, oh my God, your friend. And I was like, yeah, he's good. I remembered him as being good.
Yeah.
So they just were like a perfect fit for the things we were trying to find that the actors could do.
Mm,
And yeah, felt really lucky. And then it was during COVID, so it was like the height of Zoom, and they met, to rehearse, but
mhm.
we never did like a chemistry read or audition with them together.
Okay.
We kind
Wow.
of just were guessing, like, I think these guys will work together, but let's see. And thankfully they did. Yeah.
That's pretty incredible that you kind of knew who could do it before you went through all the steps and it worked out so well. And
I very unfortunately, there was an actor we talked to who was like, I don't think I can do it. And I think Sam and Della had like backgrounds where I was like, oh, if you've done these other things, I
mm,
feel confident that this is possible for you.
yeah,
And then they both were, to me, when I'm looking for team members, I'm looking for like who's game to try to figure it out together, who like likes
cool.
a challenge. And
Yeah.
they are both people who like a challenge. So that made it more fun when you have problems.
Yeah. So, and then in terms of the rest of the crew,
Mhm.
did I like you said, everybody likes a challenge. It's great to come on set. I've heard people say numerous times one of the best parts about being an actor, one of the best parts about being in film is trying to find things that are challenging. But
Yeah.
did you find it difficult to find people that were just on board? They're like, yeah, this is incredibly challenging, and I'm on board for it. Or like, was it difficult to find that many people?
That's like what I started with when we were talking with everyone. It's like, this
Mm,
is hard, and I need people who are excited about the fact that
yeah.
this is going to be hard and unusual. We did everything backwards.
Mm,
We had to have our composer score the film first,
oh,
because then we had to dance to it. So, like
yeah.
every step of it was like, this is not the way you've usually done it. And is that appealing to you?
Mm,
And it's pretty self-selective once you start with, well, it's going to be unusual and not the way you've done it. Do you
yeah.
want to do it? Uh, that pretty quickly weeds out people who are like, no, I'd rather just do the normal way. So I think we had a really fun team. And I think, you work on stuff where, especially if you're a gaffer, or you're there as a swing, or you're there for a day, you work on a lot of stuff, and I
Mhm,
think you feel invested in some of the stuff. um
sure.
and we had a crew that I think wrapping was like really, really stoked about what we'd done together and really excited to see it. And you just don't get to do that with every project. So I think it was, I think asking a lot of everybody like brings everybody to need to elevate themselves, and that's a fun. If you can find people who think that's fun, then that's really fun.
Yeah. And what's it like being able to trust that many people with such an incredible vision like this?
It was wild. It's really wild to show up. I mean, when you're making a play, when you're making a film, and you're doing anything, it's insane to show up and have like 20 people there trying to do something that you thought might be interesting. Yeah, I think counting, our crew and actors, I think there were like 30 people on set to make this little movie, which is just wild. So it's really surreal, and it really is that like, oh, we've made a little tribe, like this is our little summer camp for the day. And I think those are the things you try to hold on to during the next year, where you're trying to figure out like, what do I do after this?
Yeah. And then obviously the dance is such an important part of this. Dance in general makes me uncomfortable. Watching people dance in front of me makes me uncomfortable. Or listening to someone sing in front of me makes me uncomfortable because I don't know how to react. And this might be, I mean, I've seen other films with dance and I've seen other films with music, and I appreciate them and I enjoy them, even though I'm uncomfortable. This was maybe the first time that I watched it, and that made it better for me. The dancing made it better.
Yes.
So how do you do that? How do you make it so much different than other films where there's dancing, like West Side Story? I love the film, but it makes me uncomfortable when I watch it.
Both versions, Spielberg version, all
Both
of it.
both versions.
I have a lot of questions about this, but we could do this another time.
No, whatever you can do it now, that's fine.
I kind of feel similarly. Like, I get what you're saying. It's really vulnerable, and it's really kind of surprising. Even when you know it's coming, it's like, oh wait, now it's happening. And I think as we were trying to do, I think one of the things we unlocked doing this was that it should feel uncomfortable. Like, a lot of what the dance in this is capturing is the kind of like sticky, I don't really know what to do feeling of like being in a new relationship or navigating like a first fight or that kind of stuff. So I think we have the luxury of, in our choreo, trying to make those moments like lean into, oh, this shouldn't be perfect or pristine or too showy. It's a little more like the processing of like, oh, I feel kind of squirmy, and what does that do as movement? And so then I think that lets you in as the audience of like, yeah, this does feel kind of squirmy. Like, what's happening? So I think that was sort of the goal, the like magic thing I think we found, is that the dance could be a little uncomfortable for the performers, or like be a way to express that.
And then I listened to a podcast. It's called Pajama Pants. It's the two children from, obviously not children anymore, but the two children from The Sopranos. And it's Jamie Lynn Sigler and Rob Eiler, and one of his good friends. And Rob Eiler was talking about the show Love on the Spectrum, and he was expressing how much he appreciated this show, because as he's trying to date, sometimes he's just not interested in things that people are saying, and he wants people to be honest with him when they're not interested in things that he's saying. And so I never watch reality TV, but I sat down and I watched the US version. There's only 6 episodes, so I was able to power through. And I really appreciate that honesty. And I saw that obviously in Lead Follow. And why did you think it was so important to be that blatant throughout?
It's first of all, great show. Everyone should check it out. I really liked it as well. I'm not a big like dating show guy, but it is really special.
It was very good.
I think the thing that was like really a magic trick about the piece that we did is I really love when characters say exactly what they're thinking. I think it's so delightful and so surprising because it's
Hmm.
like the thing you're trained to never do as a person.
Yeah.
And then in a film, like you're supposed to have subtext. And so I think it felt so um it feels so like untethering to suddenly just have people saying what they think,
Hmm.
that it really like makes you kind of not know where you go from here. And
Yeah.
that I think was the thing we were trying to find throughout the whole film, is like that feeling of like, what do we do next,
Hmm.
is so much of like early dating. And so I think that having characters who just either I mean, they either are like totally dishonest or totally lying or
Yeah.
totally telling the truth, and there's really very little in between with the
Hmm.
dialogue. And I think that that just felt so like surprising every time. And then is a real acting challenge. Like that I
Hmm.
think is one of the things that was most challenging about the piece, is it's really hard to like then direct or act like you are saying exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is like, well, but what what is the subtext? You're like, no, you, that is it, that's what's happening. So it was a very weird, the first chunk of the film I think is the most subtextual, or like
Hmm.
most like I don't know, they're being like most dishonest, I would say.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
um and that was such a hard thing because it also came with no subtext, and so that by the end of the film it feels a little more natural in terms of style, and it feels
Hmm.
really artificial at the top, and that really artificial world was very tricky to direct, like, and to figure out
Okay.
like, how do I act, how do I perform the
Hmm.
line like I don't have baggage, you know? It's like,
Yeah.
what am I saying in this interaction?
Right.
Yeah,
I think my favorite line, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's where Della's in bed and she goes, "Sometimes I feel certain ways and I don't know why I feel these
totally.
ways." And he's just like, "Yeah, I get that. That makes sense." And I think that's one of the things that I love so much about Love on the Spectrum is they would say whatever they felt and
Yeah,
no one was ever upset about it. They just understood that
yeah,
they just are telling you the truth. And I
yeah,
loved that he just accepted it and they moved on.
yeah,
And it was such an important part of that, and I thought it was fantastic. And that was actually more uncomfortable than the dancing for me.
totally. Well,
Be,
the vulnerability, yes.
exactly, the vulnerability. You can't be honest like that in real
No,
life. You're
no,
just
it's
not able
very
to.
hard.
So to be able to see it is it's awesome.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
thank you.
of course, of course. And then with that honesty comes kind of a blend of drama and comedy. Did
Hmm.
you ever think I want to lean one way more than the other, or did
Mm.
you always think you needed to tread the line between the two?
I as a like maker, I have I, as a viewer I'm different, but as a filmmaker I have a really hard time with stuff that doesn't have like comedy in it, you know. And
Mm,
I don't think things have to be comedies, but I think that even in like really dark, very uncomfortable situations, like people make jokes, like it just is
yeah,
human to try to like change the energy.
yeah,
So I think everything I've done has always had like some comedy to it, whether, and then it's sort of like, well, what's the scale of like, is it silly, or is it a drama that has some comedy?
yeah.
I think people who are really able to like, this is the tone, like, more power to you. I can't, I can't, my brain just can't compute with like, where this is the lane we're in. Um, so I think it would have always been there. And I think it's just trying to then make sure that that all like still feels human and still
Hmm.
feels natural, even though it's like such an unnatural, the film is so weird
Yeah.
in its like construction. And so then I think the whole challenge is like, okay, well, anything that you do within that that then feels like real or authentic is gonna
Hmm.
be powerful emotionally, but also a little silly because we just
Yeah.
are in like a weird world. And so that sort of like uncanny, I think it always lived in like this weird uncanny valley of like, what what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Which is perfect for, we're first meeting a couple. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then it's not really relevant to, the film as a whole, but I'm always curious, and you were the first opportunity that I've had to ask someone about
Mm,
this. And it's obviously a little bit different for you because it takes place off screen, but what's
yeah.
it like trying to write up and film like a sex type scene?
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, you're navigating. It's interesting. Even the writing of it is weird and kind of like clunky and a little bit like, well, what are people saying during sex that feels like true but also like of the film and dramatically interesting. So I think the writing of dialogue is weird for it.
Mm,
And then, we kind of have it. We had an intimacy coordinator who was great, and I, if it's within your scope of work to be able to like find someone to do that, whether it's a real trained professional or
hmm.
even just someone who's in charge of like the choreography of intimacy and
Yeah.
is a buffer between like actor director as far as like what are your comfort levels with certain things,
Mm,
where are places that would make you uncomfortable to be touched, like that is
right.
I think it's like a just an exercise to direct intimacy is just like an exercise in like radical transparency of like where can and can't someone touch you. And then just sort of being game to be like, okay, yeah, that great. Like those are the limits and we will figure it out. I don't know. I think sex scenes in general like make me a little uncomfortable on screen. They feel always feel a little artificial, or I always feel a little like ahead of. I think part of it is that I feel ahead of the movie often, where I'm like, okay, I get what we're doing emotionally here, but
Yeah.
like, are we just indulging in that, or is this still doing something new?
Yeah.
And so I think part of the challenge for us was like, they're written in right now, but what's the length of time that we want to be in or on this scene
Mm,
before we just get it, right? Like we're as viewers are very smart, and so if you show us the image, we like immediately are like, yeah, great, like next.
yeah.
So I think it's just capturing like how do you do this efficiently. And then we have a very weird one in that like it's a single take thing, so it's also like
Yes.
how do you keep it moving, which is
Exactly.
not the goal for sex but is the goal for a short film.
But again, it works well, and I like that it's off screen. And you,
Thank you.
you just sort of see the after effects,
Mm-hmm.
and then that leads into obviously more emotional turmoil. And
Yeah.
I agree with you. It needs to be done with a purpose. It can't
Yeah.
just exist in a film, and I think it has a purpose here, and it works.
Yeah,
So
I'm not opposed to like a horny film having horny moments, but
sure.
I think it is all about, and I think of with everything you're putting in a film, like what is the intent of the scene? What am I learning about these people? And in this film, most of what we're learning is like before and after, not
Right,
during. Yeah.
right. And then I just have a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
So I want people to be able to watch this. So
Yes.
where can they find it?
Good question. We're finishing our festival circuit now, so I think that we're, by the time you post this, I will be able to say that we're also screening up in Anchorage, Alaska soon. So
Okay.
for those viewers up in Alaska, we're coming in December, which is crazy. And then, it'll be online. We're still trying to figure out exactly where that is, but you can follow me online. I'm just like at the Colby Day, or our production company, which is Not Impossible Co. So NOTIMPOSSIBLE oh no, I started to spell it. Not impossible, the words CO. And we'll post about it, and it'll be online probably early next year, but we just don't know exactly where that is yet.
Very cool. I will keep everybody updated the best I can.
Thank you.
Um,
Likewise. Yeah.
and then so what else are you working on now?
It's a ton of stuff. I have another short that I'm finishing up that weirdly started before Lead Follow. So it's called Perks, and it's about a guy who donates to a Kickstarter campaign for someone's short theater piece and never gets his perks and is like going insane because he just wants his perks from the campaign. So in a cruel twist of fate, it's about a delayed project, and it became our delayed project. It's taken way too long to make. But we're finishing that up right now, so that'll hopefully do some festivals next year, we're hoping. And I have a movie that I wrote that is going into production this spring, like a feature film, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, nice.
And then I forget because this is the big deal that I'm just trying to process emotionally. I wrote a film called Spaceman for Netflix that is directed by Johan Renck. Adam Sandler is in it. Carey Mulligan is in it. It's a big space movie that will come out next year. That's the big news that I should have led with.
Yeah, don't forget to tell people about
also. Yeah.
I was gonna say, don't forget to tell people about that one. That's a big deal. Congratulations.
That's the big deal. Yeah, thank you.
I will check it out. I will check it out when it's out, for sure.
I don't think you'll be able to miss it. It'll be the only dramatic Adam Sandler space film.
Okay. Great. I'm looking forward to it. And then I love asking this question because I get such a wide range of responses and people don't know how to react sometimes. What are some of your favorite films?
Oh my God. Yeah, of course people get upset. Yeah, you ask it in the right way, which is like, what are some? I had never seen it, and I just watched it for the first time, and it's a movie that, in first watching, I was like, oh, this will stick with me forever. Bob Fosse's All That Jazz, which if you're not a big dance guy, it is a dance movie, but you might like it. Like I've never seen a musical that works the way that Bob Fosse was making them. It's really cool. So that is one that it captures like the power of being a dumb artist and killing yourself over your art. I grew up obsessed with like Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail. That is burned deep in my brain forever. I was a big Sam Raimi head as a kid, so that was like the first. Those are really pivotal movies to me of like, oh, you can go make a movie. The Evil Deads and Army of Darkness especially. And then I don't know, there's so many good movies. There's too many good ones. How do you answer this question? You have 1 billion movies behind you, so what's your answer?
I've always answered the same way since I was a teenager.
What's the answer?
I always say Empire Strikes Back.
Sure. I mean, that's great.
And while it is a fantastic film and I genuinely love it, I know that the part of the reason that I've continued to say that is because it was important in mine and my dad's relationship. He just worked a lot. Great dad. He just worked a lot. We didn't have a lot of time to spend together. So when they re-released them in theaters before they brought the prequels out, he took me to midnight showings for each of them.
Oh man.
And I don't think I was ever allowed to stay up that late before that. And he had never been able to take me to see a movie, just the two of us. And it has stuck with me since. I think probably 50-50 because it's so good and because it played such an important role in my life. But there's so many movies. I mean, you can't really just name one.
No, you have to do like, well, here's 5 and here's why, or you have to just be like, it's this one. And it has half to do with the movie and half to do with like when and how I watched it, which I do think is half of it. And kind of what's magic
Yeah.
about a movie is like you come in with what you come in with. And you know, especially as someone who writes reviews, like you're coming in with yourself. And so there is like what happened today, who'd I see it with, like all that stuff is part of the thing. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Context is
that
important.
absolutely. And that like does make or break a movie for sure. And then
Yeah.
you crystallize the memory. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you see more films and more films you want to add to your top five, and you can only hit
Totally.
five. So, um, I mean, Encanto is one of my favorites right now.
Mm-hmm,
Believe
mm-hmm.
it or not, two musicals are my favorites right now.
For a
Tick,
guy
tick,
who's not in love with musicals, you like them.
tick. Tick, Tick, Boom and Encanto, I am in love with.
You like
Um,
them.
I, I they make me so uncomfortable.
I mean, that's you know, though, like that's the thing to lean into, I think, often. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of the stuff I've worked on has been stuff that is stuff that I'm like, I don't love how these usually are.
Yeah.
What would I do? Like what
Mhm.
don't I like about it and how would I do it differently?
Yeah.
I'm not a big dance person either. I love a lot, and then a lot of it I kind of just like don't find a way in. And so I
Mhm.
think that part of the challenge with this short was like, well, how, as a guy who has a hard time like getting into it, how do I make one that gets me into it?
Right.
Yeah, totally. So I think those genres that you're like, oh, usually this isn't for me. Like
Yeah.
I was reading that was Kubrick's whole thing, as he'd be like, oh, there's never been a good space movie, so I'm gonna make
Yeah.
2001. And like I do think that's how you get really cool, wild stuff, is
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
who's like, oh, I'm not into that genre. What do I do with it?
Mhm. Yeah. And I know why I like those two films. Like, well, I
Mm,
like Andrew Garfield. He's fantastic.
it's great.
And then one of the struggles I've always had with musicals is I can't make sense of why these people are singing randomly in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the day, and oh, everybody just knows all the words along with you. This song that you just made up 10 seconds ago,
Yep.
but it has a purpose in Tick Tick Boom, and then
Yes.
Encanto is just so emotionally relevant. I
Yeah.
relate to all of them in different ways,
Totally.
um, and but yeah, that, that,
Good
the
answers.
list goes on and on.
Good answers. I just saw Barry Lyndon for the first time. I'm on like a Kubrick kick.
Okay.
And it sort of has entered my like, ooh, is this in the top 5? Is this in the top 10? It's just like
Yeah.
a magical, wild film. You know, anytime I see a
Mhm.
movie that I'm like, oh, I've never seen anything like this, that kind of gets up there at least for a while.
Yeah, yeah. Well, with all of that being said, Lead Follow is in the top 10 for 2022 for
I love
sure.
it.
Um, Congratulations. It's fantastic. Again, everyone that's watching, please check it out. I'll keep you updated on where it is and where you can find it. And Colby, thank you again for taking some time to sit down with me and chat about your film.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Of course, we'll be in touch.
All right.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.